So the big opposition party meeting has just ended, and they had a press conference where they put out their major decisions, and it's really interesting, and this really makes the contest of 2024 quite interesting. So I'm going to take you through one of the major takeaways really, and we're going to try and break that down from what we heard from the opposition alliance. There were quite a few important leaders on stage. Some of them we understand had to leave to catch their flights, where Bangalore airport is. So they left early and they didn't attend the press conference. But we understand that 26 parties have reached an understanding to contest the 2024 election under one umbrella and one common name. And all of the campaigns that they're going to do from now till then will have that common name. Now, here's the most interesting thing. Let's look at the name. The name is the Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance, which abbreviates to India. This was the big announcement that they're going to call themselves India. Now, there were a few eyebrows that were raised saying, okay, how are they going to call themselves India and whether that's allowed and how the media is going to deal with it. Because think about the headlines. It will either say BJP defeats India, or it will say India defeats BJP, or NDA, as the case may be. So really, a lot of questions popped up on whether they're allowed to use the name India, but it's an abbreviation, so I don't know if that's going to be a problem at all. I'm looking at what the media is already doing, and they're using sort of an abbreviation. So not saying India on screen, they're saying I.N.D, like that, I.N.D.I.A. So, but it still reads India. So there's NDA versus India. And that's what's already happening on the television screens today. So which means that to some level, at least, if this was a strategy, it seems to have worked, because Mamata Banerjee spoke at the press conference and she effectively said something to the effect of, can you catch us? Can you basically can you challenge India? Can you take on India? And India will challenge BJP. So that's obviously the trick with the name, and they've come up with that name. But the most interesting thing for me from this announcement was the fact that apparently they have decided collectively that they will actually field only one candidate in India, in the Alliance of India, in major constituencies against the BJP. Now, I put this out in my previous video that we could take a look at as well. So what happens in a constituency? Let's imagine there is a BJP candidate and there is a non-BJP candidate. Now, what normally happens is there's more than one non-BJP candidate. There's someone from the Congress. If it's Bengal, let's assume there's someone from the TMC, there's someone from the left. And as things stand right now, which is, the Alliance of India versus NDA, you'll have a particular voter will either want to vote for the BJP or will not want to vote for the BJP. Now, if they don't want to vote for the BJP, there are 3 or 4 options, which means that cohort of voters then gets broken up. And none of them actually reach a height in which they can actually take on the BJP. So this is what they have decided, which is a huge deal. I personally thought it was a massive mountain for them to climb, but they seem to have climbed it. The bigger question, of course, will have to be in which constituencies, which candidate will get to contest. Because remember, these political parties are also made up of a pyramid of foot soldiers, each of whom will have somebody in a particular constituency who is either already MP or who hopes to be MP, and they will be told that, hey, listen, this time we're not contesting, we're giving it to the other party, and that's going to be difficult for them to do. But the fact that they have just acknowledged and reached the point where they've said that, hey, listen, we're going to field only one candidate is huge. And I'm sure, knowing what the BJP is like, there's going to be a huddle tonight where they're going to try and figure out how to take this on. The next thing we heard is that there's going to be a committee of 11 people that will be put together from these 26 parties, and they will choose the prime ministerial candidate. This is the interesting thing. We don't know who the prime ministerial candidate is. And there are a couple of options. Nitish Kumar, obviously, who stitched this whole thing together, who really is the most popular candidate among all of them. Hindi speaking, has done really well in his state, has a lot of goodwill, fancies himself someone who can take on the Prime Minister Modi right now. So Nitish Kumar is one of the options. Mamata Banerjee, when speaking, referred to Rahul Gandhi as all of our favorites. I think that was a clue there as well. She said all our favorites, Rahul Gandhi is here. There's also another wild card that some political analysts have started talking about, and that is Mallikarjun Kharge, who's currently the chief or the president of the Congress party. Mallikarjun Kharge, as prime ministerial candidate could also be India's first Dalit prime minister. Now, while I'm saying that, I want to point out that in 2019, when there was a state election in Karnataka, one reporter asked Mr. Kharge, do you think that you might be made chief minister and that would mean a Dalit chief minister? And he snapped back saying, stop calling me that. I'm a congressman and we will do what is best for the state, and we are not going to choose based on caste, right? So having said that, these are the options it seems like on the table right now between these three people, Nitish Kumar, Rahul Gandhi, maybe Mallikarjun Kharge. I'm just saying that we don't know how this is really going to play out. There's going to be another committee that will be put together to actually decide on the common minimum program. Now, the common minimum program will decide, like I said yesterday, on the things that these parties all agree on as part of their campaign. It did seem that they had talked a lot about Manipur, that they had talked about unemployment, they had talked about inflation and the prices of things, that they had talked about farmers. Farmers came up multiple times. They had talked about, women and safety and the economy and various sectors and corruption. It seems like all of these things are going to be part of that common minimum program that they have referred to. They've also said, and this is also really interesting for me, right? They've said that from now on, starting today, they are going to start a campaign across the country. These various 26 parties of various states are going to start protesting, agitations, dharnas against the BJP's policy and what they call the BJP's failure in various areas. So, in farmer distress, they said, in price rise, in unemployment, in, the handling of various things, that they're going to, under the banner of the Alliance of India or India, they're going to start protesting against the BJP and agitating against the BJP across the country. And that's also really interesting. Now, in the meantime, the NDA, led by the BJP, has begun its meeting in Delhi as well. We understand there are different reports. We know for sure that there are 30 parties in the NDA. Somebody said 38 as well. So we'll know, I suppose, after the meeting is over exactly how many parties are in that list. But before that, the Prime Minister spoke at an event earlier today, and he targeted this meeting that the opposition is currently, or was having at the time. And he said three things. He took them on for corruption, and he said they're extremely corrupt, and the only thing they can guarantee is corruption. He said the only thing they can guarantee is casteism, and the only thing they can guarantee is dynasty politics. Now, there is a reason why I personally think that these three sort of stands of politics for the Prime Minister, it's going to be difficult to drive home because of the various moves the BJP has made over the last few months. Now, corruption is going to be difficult to stand on because anti-corruption, because you've got in your party right now people who are accused of terrible corruption. You've got in your party right now dynasty politics. And if, for example, the Alliance of India chooses Mallikarjun Kharge as its prime ministerial candidate, then the idea of casteism also is going to be difficult to drive home. So that's, that's sort of an interesting setup at that point. And I want to point out that while, the Prime Minister focuses on dynasty politics and says that he did say in his speech earlier today that while India, the constitution is for the people, by the people, these guys are for the family, by the family, of the family. And so he's focusing a lot of dynasty politics and talking about the family, talking about corruption. Tomatoes are at 160 rupees. In many parts of the country. The government is offering them at 80 rupees in some markets, but most people are still paying between 160 and 200 rupees. So there is still pain that is not being addressed, that is not being looked at. There is unemployment. There are issues on the ground. There are infrastructural issues. All of our cities are flooding and crumbling. And, this is something that we've noticed makes people very cranky and deserves to be looked at as well. So those things are not being addressed at this point, and I think they deserve to be personally. But if we continue to look at where we are right now going forward into 2024, there was a calculation done by India today on their screen a little earlier where they said basically going by the people who are now in these two camps, which is the NDA and the Alliance of India, and the number of people who had won seats in the last Lok Sabha election, the NDA currently has about 41% of the vote share, and the Alliance of India has 36% of the vote share. So that's a close contest. and that's going to be very interesting. So we certainly have an interesting contest on our hands. You know, up until now, it was sort of a clear given that there is no one leader across the country who is as tall, as popular, or as liked as the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that may be true. But what happens when all of these guys come together collectively? Can they pull a contest? And it does seem like, you know, that may be a question worth looking at this point. Like I said, it's very likely the BJP is going to get into a huddle. They are an election winning machine. Nobody knows how to do this better than them. They're possibly going to come up with a strategy that is going to be, you know, really interesting. So that's something to watch. But elections are upon us. Everything that happens from today onwards is going to be geared towards the election. So as someone who works in news, I'll tell you what I do. Every piece of information I read, I look at it from the point of view of an election. Like, what is the vote share that's being impacted by this decision in every state and in the center? Having said that, let me also point out Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, accused of all kinds of sexual harassment by women wrestlers, has been given bail, interim bail by the courts today for 2 days, but interim bail nevertheless, at a point when, you know, there are people in jail for years, unable to secure any kind of bail. So it's interesting. Going into an election, all of these things sort of come into perspective. We're watching to see what the NDA does. We're watching to see what announcements are made and what strategy the BJP comes up with. I do have one thing though. I noticed that there is this, you know, there's this sort of idea that's been built into us that coalition politics is a bad thing, that it's khichdi politics, that no decisions get made and we sort of hit stagnation. I want to point out a couple of things. Our system was designed for coalition politics. Coalition politics, in fact, the first unified opposition happened in the 60s to take on the Congress party because it was ridiculously popular. And, you know, it was like this single massive juggernaut that couldn't be stopped. There was that united front of politics that finally defeated Indira Gandhi in the 70s. It took them 10 years to sort of keep fighting till they reached a point where they could take her down, or where they could sort of defeat the Indian National Congress. So coalition politics actually came up to take on the juggernaut that was the Congress party and Indira Gandhi back in the 70s, and she lost that election after emergency to a united front coalition. Also, let me point out at this point that both sides are a coalition. That on one side, the Alliance of India has 26 parties, and on the other side, the NDA is at least 30 parties. But I must point out, as far as the NDA is concerned, it's very clear that the BJP is the leader. It's very clear it's the BJP's way or the highway. It doesn't, you know, seek the opinions or doesn't need to take its alliance partners along as much as we've seen them do over the last 2 terms, because they don't need it. They have the numbers. They don't need to take anyone along. And that means that they have the ability, the BJP has the ability to be more decisive when it comes to matters. The other side, the flip side of it is that if there is a coalition that has to take everybody along, it needs every partner in there, then you have to listen to everybody. And so everybody gets a say. And so there's representation from everyone. And so you hear more voices, you know, while making decisions from the Northeast, from the South, from people who speak different languages, you know, from people of different communities. They're all taken along, or they need to be taken along when making those decisions. And so those are the two flip sides, really, of of coalitions. On one hand, if you have a coalition where there is a massive, strong party like the BJP, it can make decisive, quick decisions, and it can move fast on things that it needs to, as we have seen quite right the BJP do. On the other hand, a coalition of smaller partners, of more partners that need each other, means more voices get heard. There's more representation, and it doesn't feel as if Delhi is sort of, you know, more voices get heard, more representation, and it doesn't feel as if Delhi is sort of making unilateral decisions for everyone without taking everybody into consideration. But like I said, it's going to be a supremely interesting 1 year running up from now until we vote, perhaps in April-ish next year, it seems like. Because, you know, April, May is when the elections happened in 2019. One assumes it's going to happen around the same time. Because elections normally happen in the summer. Rains, as you can see, are quite disruptive in India, so which is why elections happen in the summer. So between now and then, it's going to be a really interesting time. we're going to be watching out for it. Remember, if you want more news and updates, download our app. It's called Beetroot News. It's doing really well. It's our attempt, to sort of put out the news in the most respectful, most unopinionated way, where you can just read it and you feel like you've been adequately informed and you can go about your day. There's no opinion, there's no hate, there's no algorithm at all. Take a look at Beetroot News. Thank you.